The sky split open on a night when the world was not watching. Across continents, in cities pulsing with light, and in villages where fire was still the only glow, humanity slept, dreamed, and carried on with its fragile existence. It began with tremors in the upper atmosphere, a soundless wave that rattled the clouds, bending them into unnatural arcs. Radars flickered, satellites glitched, and navigational systems worldwide spun into confusion. At first, governments dismissed it as solar interference, perhaps another storm hurled outward from the heart of the star that gave life to Earth. But then the lights appeared. High above the curve of the world, points brighter than the stars began to multiply. They did not twinkle, they did not drift with the wind. They moved with purpose, aligning themselves into patterns that no natural object would ever form. Those who gazed up at the heavens from lonely deserts or windswept mountain ridges saw them first, an audience of a few hundred scattered souls. They reported strange clusters moving against the canvas of night. By the time the reports reached military command centers, entire arrays of alien vessels were already hanging above Earth, each one as vast as a floating city. The ships were not elegant. They were hulking masses of metal, layered with jagged armor that gleamed with cold fire. Their surfaces shifted as if alive, rippling with streams of energy that no human engineer could yet comprehend. Some of them stretched longer than the tallest mountains of Earth, while others were shaped like knives poised to stab downward through the sky. Together, they formed a fleet unlike anything humanity had dreamed of in its long history of myths about gods descending from the stars. When the first broadcasts came, they carried no words. Every device capable of transmitting sound or image, from the smallest mobile screen to the greatest international broadcast satellite, shuddered with static before an image forced its way through. A face appeared, though it could not truly be called a face. The creature had 6 eyes, each a burning orb of blue set deep into black flesh that seemed more like stone than living tissue. Its mouth was a vertical gash filled with teeth that ground against one another like millstones. The being spoke, though no human tongue could describe the sound. The voice bypassed ears and struck directly into the minds of every person who heard it. The message was translated not through words, but through force of meaning. Earth has ripened. The harvest begins. Panic spread faster than fire. Across cities, people rushed into the streets, staring upward at the impossible vision. In the vast countryside of nations, entire families dropped to their knees, whispering prayers to any god who might listen. Others shouted with anger, swearing that no invader would set foot upon their soil. But as the fleet descended, humanity's divisions became irrelevant. A greater terror had arrived, one that made old quarrels between nations look like the games of children. The first attacks were not meant to conquer, but to terrify. From orbit, the alien ships released beams of energy that lanced downward, erasing entire districts of cities in seconds. Buildings crumbled into dust, rivers boiled into steam, and the air itself shook with heat so intense it twisted the horizon. Metropolises that had taken centuries to rise fell in hours. No warning was given, no demands beyond the first declaration. But the invaders underestimated what it meant to face humanity, for in the ashes of cities, something stirred. In the war rooms beneath mountains, in hidden laboratories, and in the minds of those who refused to surrender, a resolve formed. Humanity had always been a fractured species, warring with itself, drawing borders that split blood from blood. Yet, for the first time in history, the entire world understood that survival depended on unity. The aliens had technology beyond human imagination, weapons forged in the crucible of 1,000 conquered worlds. But they had never faced Earth before. They had never faced a species that thrived not by strength alone, but by defiance, by an ability to rise after every fall. The first humans to strike back were not soldiers of mighty armies, but scattered groups who refused to die quietly. In the ruins of New York, survivors crafted traps with whatever weapons they could salvage, luring alien patrols into ambushes. In the jungles of South America, villagers who had lived with little contact from the outside world fought with knowledge of the land, harassing alien scouts who dared to enter their territory. In the deserts of Africa, nomads carried news faster than machines, guiding resistance fighters through routes invisible to the invaders. The aliens called themselves the Seraph. To them, Earth was merely another world to subjugate, another harvest to claim. They had crushed dozens of species before humanity, stripping worlds of resources and life. But Earth resisted from the beginning, not with equal technology, but with an unbreakable will. The Seraph were not alone. Soon after their arrival, new fleets emerged from the dark between stars. The Torth, creatures of scales and bone, descended like predators eager to feast upon the chaos. The Vaedral, insectoid swarms guided by a vast hive intelligence, followed, seeking to enslave humanity as they had enslaved countless others. Each alien force sought Earth for itself, and thus the war became not only humanity against invaders, but also alien against alien. And through this storm of fire, humanity endured. The prologue of invasion was written in fire across the skies, but it was only the beginning of a far longer tale. A tale where humans would discover the depths of their resilience, where scattered survivors would rise into leaders, and where the spirit of a species once divided would become a weapon sharper than any blade forged among the stars. Humanity would not go quietly. Humanity would fight, adapt, and endure until the last breath. And when the last dawn of Earth came, it would not be the end. It would be the beginning of something far greater. The ruins of New York still smoked 3 days after the sky had opened. Streets that once pulsed with life were choked with rubble and ash. Skyscrapers lay snapped in half, their steel bones jutting upward like the ribs of colossal corpses. Fires still burned where alien beams had scoured entire districts into molten craters. Yet within that devastation, life stirred. Sergeant Nathan Cole pushed a slab of broken concrete off his chest and dragged himself upright. His uniform was torn, his face blackened by soot, but his eyes still burned with the sharp focus of a soldier who refused to die. He had been stationed at a forward command post near Central Park when the first strike came, a brilliant column of energy that turned night into day. Most of his unit had vanished in the blast. Nathan should have died with them, but chance, or fate, had spared him. He stumbled through the rubble, clutching the rifle that now felt useless against ships the size of cities. Every step carried the memory of screams, the deafening roar of collapsing towers, and the thunderous silence that followed. Help! The voice was faint, nearly swallowed by the crackle of fire. Nathan turned and saw a young woman pinned beneath a fallen beam. Dust streaked her face and blood matted her hair. She wore the uniform of a paramedic. Her hands clawed weakly at the debris. He ran to her side and heaved at the beam. It shifted with a groan heavy as stone, but he did not stop. With a surge born of desperation, he freed her. She gasped for air, tears cutting paths through the ash on her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "My name is Aisha." "Nathan," he said, helping her to her feet. "We need to move. They will send patrols." They fled into the ruins, searching for survivors. As they moved through shattered avenues, they found more. A boy clutching his little sister, an old man limping on a broken leg, a mother with an infant held tight against her chest. Each had escaped the fire by sheer luck, and each clung to Nathan and Aisha as if they were the last pillars of the world. By nightfall, the small group huddled in the shell of a subway tunnel. The city above still burned, and the alien fleet hung in the sky like black suns. Nathan stared upward through a hole in the collapsed ceiling. The ships did not leave. They simply hovered, waiting, watching. "Why?" the old man asked in a voice trembling with anger. "Why destroy us if they want to conquer? Why kill so many? They want us afraid," Aisha answered softly. "If we give up hope, they do not need to fight. Fear is their first weapon." Nathan clenched his fists. "Then we give them something else." Far from New York, across the ocean in the steppes of Kazakhstan, Dr. Elena Markova watched the skies with haunted eyes. She had been an astrophysicist her entire life, scanning the heavens for patterns that might reveal the story of creation. Now she stood on the balcony of a shattered observatory, watching the end of that story. The Seraph fleet blotted out the stars she had loved since childhood. Inside, the surviving scientists argued in hushed voices. Some demanded they flee to underground shelters. Others insisted they try to contact the invaders with signals of peace. But Alina's mind was elsewhere. She remembered her grandfather's words, spoken long ago when she was a child beneath a night sky free of alien shadows. Humanity's strength has never been its weapons, but its mind. When you cannot match your enemy's power, you outthink them. Those words rooted themselves in her heart. If humanity had no weapons to match the Seraph, then she would search for their weakness. Every empire had one. Every conqueror carried the seed of defeat. She gathered her notes, her research on electromagnetic interference, and the fragments of alien signals she had begun to decode in the chaos of the first days. Somewhere within that storm of noise, she believed, lay the key to understanding their enemy. Meanwhile, in the deserts of northern Africa, Malik al-Karim led his people across the dunes beneath a sky alive with alien fire. He was not a soldier or a scientist. He was a shepherd who had guided his family's herds across the sands for decades. But when the first strike fell upon Cairo, he had gathered those who fled and led them into the desert. The Seraph machines hunted from above, sending drones to scour the land. Yet the desert had always been Malik's ally. He knew its every shadow, every hidden oasis, every path invisible to outsiders. Under his guidance, hundreds of refugees disappeared into the sands, becoming ghosts that the invaders could not find. Around campfires lit carefully to avoid detection, Malik spoke words of strength to the frightened. They see us as animals to be slaughtered, but remember this, even the lion falls when the jackals strike together. We are not prey, we are hunters of the night. And so the seeds of resistance spread. The first organized strike came on the 6th day of invasion. Nathan Cole had gathered a band of survivors, growing in number as word spread that a soldier still lived among the ruins. Armed with scavenged rifles, pistols, and explosives, they prepared to ambush a Seraph patrol. The patrol consisted of 6 towering figures, each 3 meters tall, armored in plates that shimmered like liquid metal. Their 6-eyed faces glowed faintly in the dark. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. Nathan's group waited in silence as the aliens entered the subway tunnel. When the Seraph passed beneath a weakened section of ceiling, Nathan signaled. Explosives hidden among the rubble detonated, collapsing tons of concrete onto the patrol. 2 aliens were crushed instantly, their bodies splitting open with a hiss of strange fluids. The others staggered, disoriented. Now, Nathan roared. Bullets tore through the tunnel, striking the wounded Seraph. Though their armor deflected most shots, the sheer volume of fire drove them back. One alien raised a weapon that pulsed with blinding light, but Aisha hurled a stolen grenade at its feet. The blast shredded the creature, spraying shards of armor across the tunnel walls. The survivors fought with desperation, knowing every second mattered. The last Seraph fell beneath a storm of blows, its skull crushed by a sledgehammer wielded by the old man who had once limped on a broken leg. When silence returned, the survivors stood gasping, staring at the corpses of gods made mortal. "They can bleed," Aisha whispered. "If they bleed, they can die." Nathan looked at the bodies with grim satisfaction. For the first time since the invasion began, hope flickered in his chest. They were not invincible. Humanity could fight back. Above the ruins of Earth, the fleet shifted. Alien eyes watched, and for the first time, they knew that this harvest would not be as simple as those before. Thus began the first strike of humanity. It was not a great battle between fleets, nor the clash of mighty armies. It was a handful of survivors in the dark, striking down those who believed themselves untouchable. It was the whisper that spread across continents, "The aliens can be killed." And that whisper would grow into a roar. The city of Tokyo had always been a place of brilliance, a forest of towers lit by endless neon and alive with the heartbeat of millions. But in the aftermath of the Seraph arrival, it lay in ruin. Streets that once carried trains, cars, and throngs of pedestrians were now a labyrinth of shattered concrete and broken glass. The lights were gone. The only glow came from fires that burned unchecked, and from the watchful gaze of alien craft circling overhead like carrion birds. Aya Takeda stood at the edge of Shinjuku District, clutching the hand of her younger brother. At only 16, she had never thought of herself as strong. She had been a student, more interested in novels and sketchbooks than in war. But when the alien beams had cut through her city, strength had been forced upon her. Her brother, only 8 years old, trembled as they moved through the ruins. They had survived by hiding in subway tunnels during the first strikes, but food was running out. Aya had heard rumors of a resistance forming near the docks, and she clung to that rumor as if it were a lifeline. A shape moved among the rubble ahead. Aya froze, pulling her brother behind her. The figure stepped into the faint light of the fires. It was not a seraph, but a man dressed in the uniform of the self-defense forces, his armor scorched and his rifle dented. He looked exhausted, but when he saw the children, his posture straightened. "You should not be out here," he said gently. "The patrols pass often." Aya bowed her head slightly, her voice trembling. "We are looking for the resistance." The soldier's eyes hardened. "Then you have found it." He led them through broken streets to a hidden shelter beneath the remains of a department store. Inside, Aya saw dozens of survivors, men, women, and children, huddled together. A small group of soldiers and volunteers organized supplies and guarded the entrances. They had salvaged weapons from destroyed convoys, and maps were spread across the floor, marked with alien patrol routes. The leader, a woman with sharp eyes and a scar running across her cheek, rose to greet Aya. "I am Captain Yumi Sato. Welcome. If you stay, you must fight. Even if it is only with your hands, your eyes, or your voice, every life here must be part of the struggle." Aya felt her brother's small hand tighten in hers. She nodded. "We will fight." Across the ocean, in the heart of Paris, the great cathedral of Notre Dame stood blackened but unbroken amid the fire. Its stained glass was shattered, and its towers cracked, but the bells still hung high above. When the Seraph fleet had struck, the cathedral had become a gathering place, not for prayer alone but for defiance. Jacques Durand, once a history teacher, now stood at its steps with a rifle in his hands. Around him, men and women who had never held weapons before learned to aim, reload, and fire. The city was scarred, but its spirit was not destroyed. An alien patrol approached through the narrow streets. Jack ordered silence, raising his hand. The group crouched behind barricades of overturned cars and rubble. The Seraph marched forward, towering over the humans, their armor gleaming like black stone. When the aliens drew near the cathedral, Jack gave the signal. From the shattered windows above, bottles filled with fuel and fire rained down. Flames erupted across the street, engulfing the patrol. Gunfire followed, echoing between the broken walls. One alien staggered through the fire, raising its weapon, but Jack stood firm, aiming carefully before firing a single shot through one of its glowing eyes. The creature fell, crashing against the stones. The resistance cheered, their voices echoing through the ruined city. And above the smoke, the bells of Notre Dame rang, their sound defiant, carrying across Paris like the heartbeat of a living city. Far to the west, the once mighty city of Los Angeles lay in chaos. Highways twisted with wreckage, skyscrapers shattered, and the hills burned with firestorms that painted the night sky red. Amid this apocalypse, gangs and scavengers fought one another as often as they fought the invaders. But within the wreckage of an abandoned film studio, another kind of force had gathered. Maria Sanchez, a former police officer, had become the unlikely commander of hundreds of survivors. They had food from warehouses, weapons from police armories, and the will to resist. Maria stood atop a broken stage set, speaking to the crowd. Her voice carried the weight of authority forged in years of law enforcement and hardened in the days since the invasion. "They believe we are broken," she declared. "They believe we are afraid, but we are not prey. We are not cattle. This is our world, and if they want it, they will bleed for every street, every home, every life." The survivors roared with approval, and when the next patrol of Seraph descended into Los Angeles, they faced not panicked victims, but an organized militia led by a woman who would not surrender her city. As cities burned, the world's leaders struggled to hold their nations together. In hidden bunkers deep beneath mountains, presidents, prime ministers, and generals argued over strategies. Some urged immediate surrender, believing survival as slaves was better than extinction. Others demanded total resistance, even if it meant humanity's destruction. But slowly, through fractured channels of communication, a plan began to emerge. Nations that had once distrusted one another now shared intelligence. Scientists pooled data, analyzing the alien technology. Soldiers traded tactics that had worked in the ruins of cities, and whispers spread of a united effort, humanity rising not as scattered nations, but as one people. In New York, Nathan Cole's group continued their strikes, growing bolder with each victory. The Seraph sent heavier patrols, deploying drones that hovered like vultures, but Nathan and Aisha adapted. They set traps in collapsed buildings, turned sewer tunnels into ambush sites, and used the city itself as a weapon. After one battle, Nathan stood amid the wreckage of a destroyed drone, staring at its core. It pulsed with strange light, alive even in death. "We need to get this to the scientists," he muttered. "If we can learn how it works, we can find a way to kill them faster." Aisha nodded. "Every piece we take from them brings us closer." And in the deserts, Malik al-Karim's people struck at alien convoys, ambushing them from the dunes, disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. The desert became a graveyard for Seraph machines, their hulks half buried in sand. Stories of Malik spread across continents. Some called him the Desert Lion, others the Shadow of the Sands. But Malik cared little for names. His only desire was to keep his people free. One night, beneath a canopy of stars unclouded by the smoke of cities, he looked at his followers gathered around a fire. "They think they are gods," he said, "but even gods can fall. We will show them that the earth is not theirs to take. It belongs to us, and to our children, and to the generations yet to come." The people cheered, their voices rising into the night sky, carried by the wind across the endless dunes. From Tokyo to Paris, from New York to the deserts of Africa, humanity's answer to the invasion was written in blood and fire. The cities lay in ashes, but within those ashes, a flame burned brighter than any star. The Seraph had come to harvest. But what they found was a species that would not bow, would not surrender, and would not be erased. And though humanity's weapons were weak, though their bodies were fragile compared to the towering forms of their enemies, they carried within them something the Seraph could never understand: the refusal to yield. The war was only beginning, but already the harvesters of worlds realized that Earth would cost them more than they had ever paid before. Snow fell quietly over the mountains of Switzerland, muffling the distant echoes of war. Beneath the peaks, hidden deep within a fortified research facility, some of the brightest minds of humanity had gathered. Scientists, engineers, and military strategists from every continent crowded into dimly lit halls, their faces gaunt with exhaustion yet fierce with determination. Dr. Elena Markova stood at the center of the largest chamber, a projection of alien signals shimmering before her. Lines of unreadable glyphs scrolled across the air, broken fragments of intercepted transmissions. For days she had barely slept, chasing patterns that flickered just out of reach. She had begun to see not chaos but rhythm, a structure in the alien language. "They do not speak as we do," she told the gathered scientists, her voice hoarse. "They think in layers. Each signal is 3 messages woven together, one in sound, one in light, and one in pulse. Only when all are combined does the meaning emerge." A silence followed as her colleagues absorbed the revelation. Then a French physicist leaned forward. "If you can unravel their language, perhaps you can unravel their commands." Elena nodded slowly. "If we can understand how their fleets coordinate, we can disrupt them. Even the strongest enemy falls when their unity is broken. The words carried through the chamber like sparks through dry grass. For the first time since the invasion began, the scientists saw not only destruction, but possibility. In the underground shelters of Moscow, another kind of strength revealed itself. Pavel Orlov, once a factory worker, now oversaw a workshop where scavenged alien technology was dismantled piece by piece. He and his team of mechanics had no advanced degrees, no polished laboratories, only tools worn by decades of labor. Yet their hands were steady, their eyes sharp. Before them lay the shattered remains of a Seraph drone, its black metal body cracked open by explosives. Strange filaments pulsed with faint light inside. Pavel grunted as he pried free a fragment of the core. This is no different from the machines we built with our own hands. Complicated, yes, but still a machine. And every machine has a flaw. One of his companions, a wiry woman named Irina, studied the fragment under a cracked magnifying lens. If we can find where the energy flows are weakest, we can make weapons to pierce it. Pavel smiled grimly. Then we will not fight them with their weapons. We will fight them with ours, shaped by our labor, built by our will. In the forests of Brazil, the Vadral hive had begun to descend, vast insectoid creatures spreading like a living tide. Their bodies shimmered with armored chitin, their movements guided by a collective intelligence that reached across miles. They were not conquerors like the Seraph, nor predators like the Torth. They were slavers, weaving webs of control into the minds of those they captured. But the jungle was not theirs to command. Diego Ferreira, a young hunter who knew every path, every hidden river and shadowed grove, led a band of villagers through the dense foliage. They carried bows, machetes, and ancient rifles, weapons far older than the invaders. When the Vadral patrol crept through the trees, clicking and hissing in their alien tongue, Diego's band struck. Arrows dipped in venom flew from the shadows. Pit traps hidden beneath leaves swallowed the insectoid legs. Fire, carried in jars of fuel, spread across the hive creatures, sending them screeching into the night. When the battle ended, the villagers stood victorious. Diego wiped blood from his blade and spoke to his people. They think us weak because we have no ships, no machines, but the jungle is our ally. We will bleed them until they fear to enter. And so the forests themselves became weapons in humanity's hands. Meanwhile, in New York, Nathan Cole studied the wreckage of the Seraph patrols his group had destroyed. Aisha knelt beside him, examining the shimmering metal with a medic's careful eye. "They are strong," she murmured, "but they are not immortal. Look here." She pointed to a crack in the armor where bullets had lodged. "Their plating is thick, but the joints are weaker. If we aim their knees, elbows, neck, we can bring them down faster." Nathan nodded, determination hardening his features. "Then that is how we fight, not against their strength, but against their weakness. We will teach every survivor where to strike." The survivors trained in the ruins, learning to aim not wildly, but precisely. Children carried messages between groups, women and men alike learned to fight, and the resistance grew from scattered survivors into a force bound by shared purpose. In Africa, Malik al-Karim's desert warriors refined their ambushes. They had discovered that Seraph machines struggled in shifting sands, their heavy legs sinking deep. Malik ordered his people to lure the invaders into dunes where mobility failed. From the ridges, they rained fire and stone, overwhelming the machines. Each victory was small, measured in destroyed patrols and stolen supplies. But each victory carried weight far greater than numbers. Stories spread across the world of villagers defeating monsters, of survivors turning rubble into weapons, of humanity striking back. And in the hidden places of Earth, where despair had once taken root, hope began to grow. Back in Switzerland, Elena Markova at last made her breakthrough. She stood before the gathered scientists, her face pale from sleepless nights, her eyes alight with fierce triumph. "I have deciphered part of their coordination signal," she declared. "The Seraph fleet is bound together by pulses of resonance. If we can disrupt those pulses, even briefly, their ships will fall out of formation. Confusion will spread among them." The chamber erupted with excitement. Engineers immediately began sketching devices that might mimic the alien signals. Military officers whispered of traps to scatter the enemy. Elena raised her hand for silence. This is only the beginning. We cannot yet destroy them, but we can fracture their unity, and a fractured enemy can be defeated. Thus, the hidden strength of humanity revealed itself. It was not only in weapons, though weapons grew sharper. It was not only in courage, though courage burned bright. It was in the mind, in the cunning born from centuries of survival against impossible odds. Where the seraph relied on power, humanity relied on resilience. Where the Vadral relied on numbers, humanity relied on ingenuity. Where the Torth relied on predation, humanity relied on unity. The invaders had come to harvest, but the harvest was turning to war. And though Earth still lay in ashes, its people were no longer prey. They were hunters in the dark, sharpening their blades, preparing for the day when the tide would turn. The world had been broken, but it was no longer silent. Across continents, the fragments of resistance stirred and began to weave themselves into something greater. The Seraph, the Torth, and the Vadral still held the skies, their fleets blotting out the stars, but Earth was no longer only a world of victims. It was becoming a battlefield. In the mountains of Switzerland, the scientists and engineers who had labored in secrecy unveiled their first creation, a device they called the Resonance Disruptor. Forged from scavenged alien fragments and human ingenuity, it was no larger than a suitcase. Within its casing, coils of copper and shards of alien crystal pulsed together, imitating the signals that Elena Markova had deciphered. Elena stood with the military officers who had come to see the test. When activated, the disruptor will fracture the Seraph coordination pulses for a short range. It will not destroy their ships, but it will confuse them. Confusion is the seed of opportunity. The generals exchanged doubtful glances, but desperation left no room for skepticism. The device was loaded onto a truck and driven to a valley where a Seraph patrol ship hovered. When the disruptor was activated, the air trembled. The alien vessel shuddered, its smooth flight stuttering. Its lights flickered, and for the first time, the invincible machine faltered. Anti-air batteries hidden in the mountains opened fire, striking the ship again and again. Explosions tore through its hull, and the great vessel crashed into the valley floor, breaking apart in a storm of fire. Cheers erupted. Elena closed her eyes, trembling with relief. Humanity had found its first true weapon. News of the victory spread like lightning. In Paris, the bells of Notre Dame rang again, this time to celebrate. In Los Angeles, Maria Sanchez raised her weapon high before her gathered militia, declaring, "They can fall from the skies. We are not powerless." Across deserts, forests, and shattered cities, survivors felt hope ignite anew. For the first time, the invaders realized the humans were not merely resisting, they were adapting. Nathan Cole led his group through the ruins of New York with a new sense of purpose. Word of the disruptor had reached them, and though they had none of the devices themselves, they carried the knowledge that the aliens were not untouchable. Aisha walked beside him, her eyes scanning the streets. If the scientists can disrupt their ships, then we must keep striking on the ground. Every distraction we cause gives them room to fight in the skies. Nathan nodded. Then we will hit harder than before. They planned a raid on a Seraph supply node, a towering structure of black metal that had been constructed in the heart of the city. From it, drones swarmed outward like hornets. If they could destroy it, the patrols in the area would weaken. The battle that followed was brutal. Explosives planted in sewers erupted beneath the structure, toppling its foundations. Nathan's group fought in the smoke, bullets striking alien joints, grenades tearing through their ranks. When the node collapsed, its fall shook the ground for miles. The Seraph responded with fury, sending reinforcements that forced Nathan's people to scatter into the ruins, but the blow had been struck. That night, as they hid in the subway tunnels, Nathan spoke to the weary survivors. "We are not alone. Others fight across the world. And now the Seraph know this city belongs not to them, but to us. Far away, in the deserts of Africa, Malik al-Karim prepared his people for a greater strike. They had harassed patrols for weeks, but now, with knowledge of the resonance disruptor, Malik saw a chance to strike at a command vessel. His warriors, mounted on trucks and jeeps, carried makeshift weapons built from stolen parts. At the center of their caravan rode the disruptor that had been smuggled from Europe. Under the starlit sky, they approached the massive Seraph vessel, which hung above the sands like a dark moon. When the disruptor activated, the ship wavered, its formation breaking. Anti-air rockets fired, tearing into its hull. Malik's people cheered as the command vessel collapsed, crashing into the desert in a thunder of flame. The victory was not without cost. Dozens of Malik's fighters fell in the counterattack, but their names were shouted into the night, their sacrifice honored with defiance. Malik raised his fist to the sky. For every life they take, we will take 100 from them. This is our land, and no invader will hold it. The Vadral Hive faced new challenges in Brazil. Diego Ferreira's hunters had learned to strike the hive mind's nodes, killing the leaders that coordinated entire swarms. Without their guides, the insectoid creatures turned chaotic, tearing into one another in confusion. In one battle, Diego crept into the hive itself, his machete slick with blood. He slew the swollen queen at its center, and the hive collapsed in shrieks of disarray. Emerging from the smoke, Diego lifted the queen's severed mandibles high, and his people roared. The jungle echoed with a message clear to every ear: humanity had teeth. In the skies above the Pacific Ocean, a battle unlike any before raged. The Torth fleet had clashed with the Seraph, both eager to claim Earth for themselves. Human submarines hidden beneath the waves seized the moment, launching missiles at weakened alien craft. To the astonishment of their crews, one of the missiles struck true, piercing an already damaged Torth cruiser. The massive vessel fell from the sky, crashing into the ocean with a thunderous impact. For the sailors who watched, it was proof that even the predators of the stars could bleed. Their reports traveled quickly, bolstering the courage of fighters across the world. In the hidden bunkers where world leaders still survived, the arguments changed. Once, they had spoken of surrender. Now they spoke of strategy. Borders no longer mattered. Nations shared weapons, supplies, and soldiers. For the first time in history, humanity stood as one. The leaders declared a global alliance, not in the name of conquest, but survival. And in every ruined city, every hidden village, every campfire in the desert, people swore oaths to that cause. The Seraph responded with fury. They unleashed new weapons, storms of plasma that scoured entire landscapes, machines that drilled into the earth itself, drones that hunted with inhuman precision. The Vadral sent greater swarms, blotting out the skies with wings. The Torth descended with packs of armored predators, their claws sharp enough to rend steel. But the more they struck, the harder humanity resisted. In Paris, Jacques Durand and his fighters rang the cathedral bells in the middle of battle, their sound drowning out the alien roars. In Los Angeles, Maria Sanchez led her militia in street-to-street warfare, turning the ruins into a labyrinth of traps. In Tokyo, Ayatakta, though only 16, guided survivors through sewers to ambush points, proving that even the young could be leaders in war. In Switzerland, Elena Markova stood once more before the scientists. She was exhausted, her body frail from sleepless nights, but her eyes blazed. "We have cracked more of their signals," she said. "The resonance disruptors can be amplified. If we can build larger arrays, we may scatter entire fleets. And if we scatter them, we can strike them one by one. We can turn their strength into weakness." The room fell silent. Then the generals spoke as one: "Build them." And so humanity began its greatest project, constructing towers of resonance hidden across mountains, forests, and ruins. The day would come when they would unleash them together, a storm of disruption across the skies. Thus the tide began to turn. The invaders had come expecting prey. They had found predators. They had come expecting harvest. They had found hunters. They had come to erase humanity, but instead they had awakened a unity that had never before existed. The ashes of Earth glowed red with fire, but within those ashes a light was rising. The war was far from over. The greatest battles still loomed, but for the first time, humanity did not fight merely to survive. Humanity fought to win. The first human aircraft to face the alien fleets were not sleek spacefaring vessels, but the battered remnants of Earth's own air forces. Jets, bombers, and helicopters, many pulled from hangars where they had sat for years, were repaired with desperate hands. Mechanics worked under the glow of lanterns and torches, welding plates of alien alloy scavenged from wrecks onto the frames of human craft. In a hidden airfield in Poland, a squadron prepared for launch. Their commander, Captain Daniel Hayes, strode down the line of patched fighters. He had flown missions in wars long past, but never against an enemy like this. His hair was streaked with grey, his face carved with scars of both battle and loss, but his voice still carried the weight of command. "Today we do what no one has dared," he told the pilots. "We strike them in their skies. If we fall, others will rise. If we succeed, humanity will know we are not bound to the ground. The sky belongs to us as well." The pilots saluted, their eyes filled with grim determination. Engines roared to life, filling the night with thunder. One by one, the fighters lifted from the runway, climbing into the dark heavens where alien ships waited like shadows against the stars. The battle began near the coast of the Baltic Sea. Seraph patrol craft descended to meet the human fighters, their forms sleek and deadly. Energy beams lanced through the air, slicing the night apart. Human jets weaved desperately, releasing flares and countermeasures. Some were destroyed instantly, consumed in fire, but others pressed on, launching missiles tipped with warheads salvaged from old stockpiles. To the astonishment of the pilots, one missile struck true. A Seraph craft erupted in a blossom of flame, tumbling into the sea below. The cheers that followed shook the radios with fierce pride. "Confirmed kill," Hayes shouted. "They bleed in the skies as they bleed on the ground. Press the attack." The squadron fought like wolves against lions, tearing at the flanks of the invincible predators. Dozens of human aircraft were lost, but when the survivors returned to the airfield, they carried with them proof that the skies were not untouchable. Word of the battle spread. Across the world, other air forces rose. In the deserts of Nevada, pilots flew patched-together stealth bombers, their wings etched with dust and ash. In India, squadrons of fighters painted with the colors of their homeland streaked upward to challenge the enemy. Even ancient propeller-driven planes were dragged from museums and rearmed, flown by volunteers who refused to watch the skies remain enslaved. And always, they carried with them fragments of alien wreckage woven into their machines. Humanity's weapons grew sharper with every piece of knowledge stolen from the invaders, but the Seraph were not idle. They unleashed vast carriers, ships the size of cities, from which swarms of drones poured like hornets. The skies blazed with war. It was then that Alina Markova's work bore new fruit. The larger resonance arrays, built in secrecy across mountains and forests, were activated together for the first time. A wave of disruption rippled through the heavens, scattering Seraph formations. Carriers faltered, drones lost coordination, and human pilots seized the moment to strike. Above the Rocky Mountains, a great Seraph carrier shuddered under bombardment, its formation broken by resonance pulses. Missiles slammed into its hull, tearing open its armored shell. The titanic vessel fell in a cascade of fire, crashing into the mountainside with a roar that shook the earth. Survivors miles away raised their fists to the sky, cheering as if they themselves had struck the blow. In the Pacific, human submarines launched hidden strikes against the Torth fleet. Torpedoes armed with stolen alien cores detonated beneath their ships, tearing holes in their predators' armor. Above the waves, human aircraft harried the damaged vessels, driving them into retreat. For the first time, the three alien races turned their fury not only against humanity, but against one another. The Seraph accused the Torth of cowardice, the Vaedrils swarmed recklessly into battles they could not control, and amid their chaos, humanity struck again and again. But victory was not without cost. In the skies above New York, Nathan Cole's resistance fighters watched as a great battle unfolded. Human jets clashed with Seraph drones, missiles lighting the sky like falling stars. Aisha tended to the wounded who staggered back from the front lines, her hands red with blood. When one of the resonance towers was destroyed by alien fire, the Seraph ships regained their coordination. A wave of drones descended upon the city, slaughtering anyone they found. Nathan and his fighters battled in the streets, holding the line long enough for civilians to escape into the tunnels. At the end of the day, the city lay scarred with new craters, and Nathan's group had been reduced to half its number. Yet even in the grief, they carried pride, for they had stood against gods in the sky and endured. In the deserts of Africa, Malik al-Karim watched as a massive aerial battle raged above the sands. His people had no planes, no ships, only rifles and trucks. Yet when one Seraph craft was struck by resonance pulses and plummeted from the sky, Malik's warriors swarmed upon it before the aliens could recover. They tore into the wreckage, slaughtering the survivors, and claimed the weapons within. For Malik, it was proof that even without wings, his people could strike at the heavens. "The sky is theirs," he told his warriors, "but the earth beneath it is ours, and from the earth we will drag them down." In Tokyo, Ayatakta watched alien ships burn from the roof of a ruined building. The sight filled her young heart with fire. She turned to Captain Yumi Sato, who stood beside her. "Do you see?" Aya asked. "They can fall. Even the sky does not belong to them." Yumi smiled, a rare warmth in her scarred face. "Yes, child, and when they fall, we will be there to finish them." The war for the skies stretched across continents, a storm of fire and steel. Humanity bled in every battle, but with each sacrifice, the invaders bled as well. The Seraph could no longer descend unchallenged. The Torth could no longer hunt without fear. The Vaedril swarms faced fire wherever they spread. And above it all, Elena Markova continued her work. She believed that the resonance disruptors were only the beginning. Somewhere within the alien signals, deeper still, lay the secret to turning the entire war. The skies still burned, cities still lay in ruin, but humanity had risen higher than ever before. No longer bound to the earth, they reached upward, seizing the very domain the invaders had claimed. The war for the skies had begun, and for the first time, Earth's defenders were not merely surviving. They were winning battles among the stars. The world that had once been fractured by borders and rivalries was gone. The invaders had burned away the illusions of separation. In the fire of their destruction, humanity discovered something it had never known in its long history: absolute unity. The first great council of survivors gathered in the cavernous remains of an underground train terminal in Switzerland. The roof had long since collapsed, leaving jagged concrete teeth above, but the chamber still echoed with voices. Generals from fallen armies sat beside village elders. Former presidents and prime ministers argued beside shepherds and miners. There were no flags, no anthems, no titles. The only symbol was the battered globe carved into the wall behind them, painted by children who had survived the first months of the war. Elena Markova stood before the assembly, her frail body wrapped in a coat several sizes too large, her hands trembling as she clutched notes scrawled on scraps of paper. She looked at the faces before her, faces of every shade, every age, every wound, and felt both the crushing weight of responsibility and the burning light of hope. "The invaders thought we were divided," she said. "They thought our differences would keep us weak. They believed we would kneel to them one by one. They were wrong. We are not divided. We are one people. We are Earth." The words spread like fire through the chamber, carried on whispers and roars alike. For the first time, there was no hesitation. Humanity would no longer fight in fragments. From that moment, the alliance was born. It had no name, for it needed none. It was not an empire, nor a coalition of convenience. It was survival given form, will made flesh. Across the globe, messages spread through hidden radios and signal fires on mountaintops. Fighters in Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas pledged themselves to the same cause. Weapons and supplies were shared without hesitation. Engineers in Japan sent schematics to builders in Egypt. Farmers in South America shipped grain to soldiers in Russia. The world itself became a single body, every part sustaining the others. Nathan Cole, who had fought in the ruins of New York, felt the shift in his bones. He stood before his battered fighters in the tunnels and told them, "We are not only a city, we are not only a nation. We are Earth, and Earth has teeth." His words became a rallying cry painted on walls across the ruined city. "We are Earth." In Los Angeles, Maria Sanchez drilled her militia until they moved like a single machine. When shipments of resonance disruptors arrived from Europe, she deployed them with precision, luring Seraph patrols into kill zones where the devices shattered their formations. After one such battle, she climbed onto the wreckage of a fallen Seraph walker, her rifle raised high, and shouted to the cheering survivors, "Do you hear me, sky demons? This city will never belong to you." In Africa, Malik al-Karim became a legend. His warriors, mounted on rusting trucks adorned with the flags of every tribe, struck with uncanny precision. With resonance towers hidden in desert caves, they created deadly ambushes. Stories spread that Malik himself could bring down ships with the strength of his voice alone, though he always laughed when he heard such tales. "We do not need myths," he told his people. "We are myth enough. We are living proof that no conqueror can tame the human spirit." Diego Ferreira, in the jungles of Brazil, forged alliances among scattered bands of survivors. Hunters who had once fought for scraps now fought side by side. Together, they burned hive after hive of the Vadral, cutting out their queens and holding the trophies aloft as proof of human defiance. "The forest is ours," Diego declared. "And if they wish to take it, they must pay with rivers of their blood." Even children became part of the war. Aya Taikta, though still only 16, was entrusted with the command of a small band of scouts. She guided civilians through sewers, mapped enemy patrols, and carried messages between resistance cells. Older fighters looked to her with respect, for she moved with the calm certainty of one who had already accepted death but refused to surrender life. "When they look at me," she told Captain Yumi Sato one night as they watched the fires of battle from a rooftop, "they see a child. But when they look at us together, they see something greater. They see humanity refusing to die." Yumi placed a hand on her shoulder, "And that is worth more than any weapon." The unity of Earth grew stronger with every passing week. Resonance disruptors were mass-produced in hidden workshops. Drones salvaged from alien wreckage were reprogrammed to serve human fighters. Even old satellites were brought back to life, carrying coded signals across continents. For the first time, alien fleets met organized resistance not only on the ground and in the skies, but across the globe in coordinated strikes. Seraph carriers were lured into traps where resonance towers crippled them, allowing aircraft to finish them off. Torth hunting packs were ambushed simultaneously in 5 different countries, their corpses strung up on ruined skyscrapers as warnings. Vadral swarms were driven into firestorms set by united militias, their wings burning in the night. The invaders were shaken. The Seraph, whose pride had never before been wounded, began to argue among themselves. Their fleets grew scattered, their strategies desperate. The Torth grew cautious, unwilling to risk their prized hunting beasts. The Vadral swarms thrashed in confusion, driven into mistakes by relentless human traps. For the first time, the predators of the stars realized their prey was not prey at all, and yet the cost was unbearable. Entire cities were leveled in retaliation. Millions perished in firestorms unleashed from orbit. The oceans boiled in places where alien weapons had struck. Humanity's unity was not forged in triumph, but in blood. One night in the council chamber in Switzerland, Elena Markova sat alone with her notes. She was weary beyond words, her body frail, her mind heavy with the weight of the dead. But as she looked at the painted globe on the wall, the symbol drawn by children, she felt her resolve steel itself once more. She whispered to herself, "We are one. And if we are one, we cannot be broken." Thus the world stood on the brink of a new age. Humanity had been beaten, burned, and bloodied, but it had risen, unified as never before. The invaders still held the heavens. Their fleets still cast shadows across continents, but the shadow was no longer feared. For in the heart of every survivor, from the oldest general to the youngest child, burned the same unshakable truth. Humanity would not kneel. Humanity would stand. Humanity would fight together until the last dawn. The invaders had carved their fortresses into the bones of Earth, towering citadels of alien alloy that rose above ruined cities. They were not merely military bases. They were monuments of conquest, places from which the Seraph, the Torth, and the Vedral proclaimed their ownership of the world. For months, they had seemed untouchable, but now humanity had teeth sharp enough to bite. The council in Switzerland made its decision. The time for defense was over. The time had come to strike the invaders in their very nests. In the ruins of Berlin, a Seraph command spire rose like a black fang. From its peak, pulses of alien light transmitted orders across Europe. For the Seraph, it was a beacon of control. For humanity, it was a chain around their necks. Captain Daniel Hayes led the assault. His patched fighter jets and bombers roared over the city, dropping their payloads upon the defenses. On the ground, resistance fighters stormed through shattered streets, carrying resonance disruptors strapped to their backs. Nathan Cole's group had traveled from New York to join the battle. Aisha marched at his side, her rifle steady, her eyes burning. They crept through the subways, emerging beneath the spire's foundations. With explosives made from scavenged alien cores, they planted charges at the base. The Seraph poured out to meet them, their armored forms towering, their weapons scorching the streets with fire. The battle was chaos, a storm of bullets, plasma, and screams. Men and women fell by the dozens, but they pressed on, driven not by orders, but by a will older than fear. At last, the explosives detonated. The spire groaned, split, and toppled. Its fall shook the ground, crushing Seraph warriors beneath its collapsing mass. As the tower fell, its signal went dark. Across Europe, Seraph formations faltered. Nathan stood among the ruins, his body torn with wounds, his rifle empty. He looked to Aisha, who still stood, her face streaked with blood and ash. They embraced wordlessly, knowing they had torn one of the chains from Earth's throat. In the Amazon, Diego Ferreira led hunters into the heart of a Vedral hive. The insectoid creatures had built their citadel from living resin, a monstrous structure that pulsed with alien life. Within it, a queen spawned endless soldiers. Diego carried a flamethrower strapped to his back, its fuel mixed with alien chemicals stolen from fallen drones. His hunters crept through the undergrowth, their bodies painted in mud and ash. When the first Vedral emerged, they struck like jaguars. Machetes cleaved through chitin. Spears pierced soft flesh. Grenades tore swarms apart. Inside the hive, Diego lit his weapon. A river of fire poured forth, burning through walls of resin, searing the queen and her drones. The hive shrieked, the sound echoing like the scream of 1,000 dying beasts. When the queen fell, the hive collapsed in chaos. Vedral turned upon one another in madness, their coordination shattered. Diego emerged from the flames, his face blackened, his arms bloodied, but his eyes fierce. Behind him, the hunters lifted the severed mandibles of the queen as a banner. The jungle had been chained. Now it was free. On the plains of Mongolia, the Torth had built kennels where their monstrous predators were bred. Massive pits of steel and bone stretched across the land, filled with creatures engineered for war. Humanity feared these beasts most of all, for they were cunning, armored, and merciless. Malik al-Karim led the charge. His desert warriors, joined by horsemen from the steppes, stormed the kennels with a fury that shook the ground. Trucks mounted with heavy guns opened fire, tearing through the alien beasts. Horsemen rode between the kennels, lobbing grenades into the pits. Malik himself carried a resonance disruptor on his back. When he activated it, the Torth beasts shrieked, their coordination faltering. His warriors seized the moment, slaughtering them in waves. At last, Malik climbed to the top of a kennel wall, his rifle blazing. The beasts below writhed and roared, but they could not reach him. With a final detonation, the kennels collapsed, burying the creatures beneath tons of rubble. Malik raised his fist to the sky. "No chains shall hold us," he roared. His warriors echoed the cry until the plains thundered with their voices. In Tokyo, Aya Taketer and her scouts struck at a Seraph outpost hidden in the ruins of Shinjuku. They carried no heavy weapons, only rifles and grenades. But they carried something greater, unity. Aya led them through tunnels she had mapped herself. They planted charges beneath the alien generators, timing their attack with airstrikes above. When the charges detonated, the outpost fell into darkness. As Seraph reinforcements swarmed, Aya stood in the street, her rifle trembling in her hands. She began to sing. It was a song her mother had sung to her before the invasion, a song of spring and hope. Her scouts joined in, their voices rising together, echoing through the ruined streets. The Seraph faltered, confused by the defiance. And in that moment, hidden fighters emerged, guns blazing, cutting the aliens down. When the battle ended, the scouts painted words on the walls in blood and ash. "We are Earth." One by one, the alien strongholds fell, command spires toppled, hives burned, kennels collapsed, outposts crumbled, humanity's chains were breaking, the invaders raged, the Seraph unleashed orbital firestorms, the Torth released their deadliest predators, the Vadral swarmed in numbers beyond counting, but the unity of Earth did not falter. Every attack was met with resistance, every blow with defiance. And in the heart of Switzerland, Elena Markova watched as maps lit with victories. Her frail hands trembled, but her voice remained steady as she spoke to the council. "We have broken their chains, now we must break their backs." Thus humanity rose from the ashes, no longer hunted, no longer enslaved. The invaders still held the skies, their fleets still circled above. But their grip on Earth was shattering. The time was coming when humanity would strike not only upon the ground, but into the heavens themselves. The chains were broken. The war was no longer for survival. It was for victory. The sky was alive with fire. Not the soft orange of city fires, nor the smoky gray of ruined forests, but a storm of light and shadow, of alien craft and human ingenuity colliding above the globe. Humanity had learned to fight not only on Earth, but in its very heavens. The war that had begun in broken streets, jungles, and deserts now reached its apex among the clouds and stars. From the ruins of every continent, fleets assembled. Fighter jets patched with alien alloy streaked toward the clouds. Human-engineered drones swarmed upward from hidden launch sites. Missile batteries fired from mountains, deserts, and seas, their warheads screaming toward alien ships. Even satellites, long forgotten, had been reactivated to relay signals and disrupt enemy communications. At the center of the coordinated strike was the greatest resonance array ever built. Towers across the globe pulsed together, sending waves of disruption into the alien formations. Ships shuddered, formations splintered, and for the first time, the invaders showed confusion. Captain Daniel Hayes led the assault against a Seraph fleet above the North Sea. His fighters danced between beams of alien fire, dodging plasma and returning shots wherever they could find chinks in armor. The resonance disruptors worked as designed. The Seraph flagship trembled, its immense shields flickering and failing. Hayes fired his missile payload directly into the hull. The ship erupted in a storm of flame, tumbling into the icy waters below. The fleet around it faltered, leaderless and disoriented. Human pilots pressed the advantage. Each craft took risks no training could prepare them for, swooping into the chaos, striking where the aliens were weakest. By the end of the first wave, half of the Seraph fleet was destroyed or forced to retreat. Over the plains of Siberia, the Torth unleashed their monstrous hunting packs. Humanity had prepared. Resonance disruptors, combined with long-range missiles and coordinated airstrikes, fractured the Torth's control over their beasts. Malik al-Karim's forces, mounted and swift, struck where the predators faltered. Riders leapt from horses onto the backs of Torth beasts, grenades in hand, ripping their armor apart. The predators, once feared above all others, fell before human cunning and courage. By the end of the day, the Torth were broken as a fighting force on Earth. Only remnants remained, fleeing toward the safety of orbit or distant strongholds. The Vadral hive crumbles, the jungles of Brazil burned once more. Diego Ferreira led the final strike against the largest surviving Vadral hive. It was colossal, a living fortress pulsing with alien energy. Hunters emerged from every direction, setting fire to the outer walls, while precision strikes from human aircraft tore into the hive's interior. Diego carried the flamethrower at the heart of the assault, driving deep into the structure. The queen, massive and grotesque, shrieked as her hive disintegrated around her. When she fell, the swarm collapsed entirely. Any remaining Vadral fled into the night, leaderless and scattered. The forest, once their domain, was free. With the alien armies fractured, humanity turned its full attention to the orbital fleet. The resonance arrays reached their maximum output. Ships wavered in space, communication disrupted, formation broken. Human pilots in reactivated shuttles and retrofitted aircraft launched into the upper atmosphere. In a synchronized strike, missiles, drones, and ships surged toward the alien vessels. Explosions lit the sky as the once mighty fleets burned. The Seraph, Torth, and remaining Vadral fought desperately, but their coordination was gone. One by one, their warships fell. Nathan Cole and Aisha Taikta led a boarding assault on a crippled Seraph command ship. They moved through corridors lit with alien light, silent and deadly. Each alien they encountered fell under precise strikes, and when they reached the bridge, Nathan planted explosives that would render the ship unusable forever. The ship erupted, spinning into the void. Through the viewport, Nathan looked down at the blue and green sphere below. Earth had survived. Earth had won. Victory, the skies were littered with wreckage, but the human forces remained standing. Across continents, survivors raised their voices in triumph. Bells rang in ruined cities, fires burned in victory, and the Earth itself seemed to breathe again. Elena Markova, exhausted beyond words, stood with the council in Switzerland. "It is over," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We have won, Earth is ours." But she knew the cost. Millions had perished, cities lay in rubble, forests and seas bore the scars of war. Humanity had survived, but it had been tested beyond imagination. Still, in the streets, in the deserts, in the jungles, and in the mountains, people danced, sang, and embraced. They had faced the impossible, and they had emerged victorious. Across the globe, humanity finally understood its greatest strength: unity, courage, and the refusal to kneel before any enemy, no matter how powerful. And as the sun rose over a battered but unbroken planet, Nathan looked to Aisha and said, "We have fought for Earth, and Earth has answered. We are alive, and we are free." For the first time in months, the world was silent, not with fear but with peace. The invaders were gone. Humanity had won.